So I'm going to study KDE Dolphin source code, basically this repository here. And what I think this is, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is a file system designed for a Linux distribution. But I think it is separate than the operational system. I don't understand very well how it works. I think that the code on the repository is just for the file explorer. So basically the image here, I assume that's the code is just for this. And they use the Qt library to draw. So the reason why I'm studying this is because I'm trying to implement the file system on a scene that I'm creating on the Godot engine. And I basically translated the file that they use, the class that they use to show the files and folders of the project on the editor, which is called editor file system. It's both the editor file system and the file system doc. And I translated those classes to, I basically just changed the name and I changed a couple of things to make it work with the stuff that I'm trying to do. But the issue is that they are not optimized for loading very large directories. So when I select a very big directory, it doesn't show anything because they load everything at once, and then only after they load everything, they send a signal to the class that is responsible for creating the classes that are gonna actually show or display the folders and files on the GUI element. So I'm trying to figure out ways to study other projects that implement a file system to see how they optimize the file system to make it work. So I've been trying to build this, but it's very annoying, and there is a bunch of I tried a couple of different ways. Like I tried like the main way first, which is just to run the CMake, and there is they ask for the CMake requires a package to work, and this package I think that there's a couple of different ways to get it, and I've been using ChatGPT and then trying a bunch of different ways, but it's very annoying, and all of the ways so far don't work because of different reasons. So now I created a Qt account and I'm trying to install this. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna be able to install because this is supposed to work on Linux. It is for the Linux, but it is supposed to work on Windows as well. But I think it's just easier to install if you're using Linux. And also, one of the ways there, I was looking at the documentation, it takes a massive amount of memory to be able to download I think it's KDE Builder or something like that. It's like almost 200 gigabytes, which is is really insane. But yeah, since I don't like really care about this, like what I'm gonna do now is just spend some time studying the project, the source code, and then if I find that it's very hard to understand, then I might try to invest a bunch of time to figure out how to build. But I think I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT, and then I'm gonna go back and forth between the source code and ChatGPT to see if I can, just by reading at the source code, I can understand the part that is relevant to me. put some music for myself. And maybe I should create a notes thing for this. I guess I can put some here. I don't remember if I put this on the folder. Yeah, I put it on the Go folder as well. So I'm just gonna use this one. I wrote down, I copied this stuff here that ChatGPT recommended should use for the debug. But since I encountered the problem with CMake, yeah, not really sure if I'm gonna use that. I think I'm just gonna write down this stuff here. I'm gonna search for the keywords that ChatGPT says. It's probably better to copy the stuff that ChatGPT says, to have an idea, and then I go over the stuff that it's saying. It basically complains on the CMake that you need this ECM, but I imagine that there's gonna be a lot more problems, and that's kind of the frustrating thing because it requires a bunch of different packages, and I'm not really sure if I have the memory either. Should I load all these packages? Because, like I said, the builder system there takes 200 gigabytes, which is insane. But so this is the main CMake that they have on the source code there, and it requires this extra CMake modules. And then when you try to install this, it's not finding Qt, so I have to install Qt. And to install Qt, you have to create an account. And it also takes a massive amount of memory. So, you know, okay. So let's see what ChatGPT is saying. I'll put this stuff. Let's use Speechify to read this. So let's see. It's saying that on source views there is a code related to the views, and the source models is the code related to the models. It looks like it doesn't have. So he's hallucinating, either hallucinating on the models or it is an older version. But it looks like it does have the view. I think probably the best thing to do is try to figure out what is the flow of data. So I need to create a picture. So like ChatGPT says there, I think that's probably the way that it works is just model view controller thing, just like the pattern that everyone uses, it seems like. So I think that's the views are obviously going to be on this folder. So that's what's those are the classes that are going to create the what you see on the user interface. And then they're probably going to have events that after the event is triggered is going to communicate with other classes that are probably on the controller and then uses the model to organize the data. So I need to clarify the picture of the flow of data from the view to from the view to the server. So what is the path? And that's probably what I'm gonna ask there. So when I create, obviously I'm not really like ChatGPT can hallucinate, so I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to just with ChatGPT alone. But regardless of whether or not I can with ChatGPT, I think that's I should focus on that. So the first thing is to understand the flow. Then once I understand the flow, I'm going to be able to see what parts are what parts are related to the optimization of like should the way that they are gonna decide how to load the directory. So the problem is that so maybe I should ask first how exactly this is supposed to work because I'm not really sure what is the relationship between so like the picture that I have in my mind right now, which I'm not 100% sure, is that this is kind of like a framework that you can use on Linux. So it's kind of like a composable thing where Linux is the kernel and you can use different frameworks to build the user interface on top of the like the base. So like you have a skeleton, which is the Linux kernel, and then from the skeleton you can compose different libraries and different frameworks to build the user interface and other stuff. So I think that this Dolphin is like a framework that you can use on Linux to build the user interface. But I don't know for sure if that's the case and how it is connected. So okay, I need to clarify. I'm gonna try obviously to see. 'Cause even if it's not correct, I think then it's gonna be helpful just to because then I can explore these assumptions as I look into the code. And from what I've seen, like I disagree with people that say that ChatGPT hallucinates on assembly or other stuff like this just because it doesn't have a lot of data. I think that's false. From what I've experienced, it is correct like a very large amounts, a very large percentage of the time. It only hallucinates like every now and then. So I think it depends a lot on the way that you say it, and also how much knowledge you have, so that you can go back to first principles and have a decent intuition of when it is hallucinating or when it's not. But I think it's worth it to take the risk anyway. It's just more efficient. So saying Dolphin model, I'm gonna search for these keywords as well. So I'm gonna ask probably what is the, so yeah, let me ask. I should have asked this before, but I can ask this again later, so I can get these names here. Because otherwise, I'm gonna be like spending much time on stuff that doesn't matter, and obviously I don't want to do that. So this thing is fucking annoying. So file manager used within the KDE Plasma desktop environment is primarily responsible for managing interacting with files and directories. Oh, does not generate the whole GUI. I'm gonna ask now, uh, can you walk? So before I ask the flow, I'm going to ask about the how is usually how does it usually work? I'm trying to have an idea because the way that the obvious way and simplest way that I'm thinking about in my mind now is that the way that it's gonna work is like you have the KDE code. The KDE code is compiled with some other code that is responsible for the external environment, and then that's the entirety of that code. The final code is gonna be the kernel or the operational system. And so like the KDE code is like an island inside of this context. And then you're gonna have the inputs and outputs that are gonna interact with the system, which is basically the code that I have there. And those inputs and outputs are gonna dictate the flow of the data and the states of that the code produces. So I'm thinking about the easiest example, which is just a double click on a folder. So I say you want, so the desktop, for example, would be coming from a code that is outside of the repository that I have there, which is related to the operational system. And the user clicks there. The user double clicks on a folder on the desktop. Then after this, it sends a signal or an event to the code that I have there on the repository, which is related to the file system, and then that code starts executing. So I want to clarify on my mind how does that work, because then I can ask ChatGPT later how, from that point, what happens on the flow of execution. That's what I want to understand, because then I can get the keywords related to that, and I can create a picture on my mind of what is happening from the moment that you double click to the moment that the thing is loaded, and then I can try to see what are the nuances that are making the code fast, because obviously what I want to do is to extract the nuances to the extent that I can. And if I can't, obviously as I do this, I'm going to just use ChatGPT, probably Perplexity, and try to read in the documentation to find the stuff that I don't know. That's probably like functions related to Qt and stuff like that. So I can understand how they work. Then after understanding how they work, I can think about how to translate that into the libraries that Godot is using. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. Okay, so it's saying that this Wayland. Now I don't understand for sure the difference between, because it's saying Dolphin here, so I'm not sure. I don't think it's referring to KDE Dolphin, but maybe it is. So let me read this again to understand. But it's saying that it's gonna be on this Plasma shell, the whole thing, and this Wayland compositor. So user action, create applications like Dolphin, execute in response to user actions, blah blah blah. Example, double click. Specific flow depends on application and is in interaction with the Plasma shell. User double clicks a folder in Dolphin. This is an input event captured by the X11 server or a Wayland. So I don't know why Speechify is doing this stuff. I'm gonna write the arrows here. So X11 Wayland server. The Plasma shell then passes the event to Dolphin. Plasma shell passes event to Dolphin. Or whichever file manager is in use, triggering the file manager to open the folder. Yeah, so I assume that before this is not related to the code that I have there. After, on this step is the bridge between this Plasma shell and the file manager. KDE Plasma communicates with Q. KDE Plasma communicates with Q. So this is the part that I think is kind of confusing because yeah, so now I'm not 100% sure if it is on this part here because it looks like there is another code that's like there's a bigger framework that is gonna manage the file manager, if that makes sense. So like because obviously it's gonna depend on which library or which framework you're using as a file manager. So I think that this KDE Plasma is still not the code that I have there. And this key IO is the code that I have there. KDE IO library. KO. Yeah, so this IO library seems to be the bridge between the KDE and the outside. Key IO abstracts access to files, enabling Dolphin to access not just local files but also network file systems, FTP. Input events and Plasma Shell. Input events captures input events, models, blah blah blah, and these events are sent to appropriate KDE application or Plasma Shell component. Plasma Shell listens for these events and determines which application should handle the interaction. KDE Plasma uses Qt, a framework for GUI applications, to process events and manage the visual components of the desktop. Qt reacts to events and updates the UI accordingly, launching applications. So I guess this is another, I'm just gonna, based on this thing here, this boundary, I'm gonna ask what's exact moment. User opens an application, the Plasma Shell uses KDE frameworks to launch that application, and the environment variable, session settings, and any initial application arguments. The KRunner launcher part of Plasma can also be invoked by pressing on space. This is part of KDE's system-wide search and launcher mechanism. KDE calls execution entry points. The Plasma Shell is the main entry point when the KDE session starts. It manages the workspace panel, system tray, notifications, and interactions with applications. Plasma coordinates various user actions and interacts with KDE applications via the KDE framework library. Specific entry points, Dolphin. If the user interacts with Dolphin, the interaction begins with KDE frameworks triggering events. So it looks like it begins with this. Dolphin then uses Qt to display its GUI and key IO to interact with files and directories. So I'm gonna ask actually, yeah, I'm gonna ask what happens when the user clicks the. I'm gonna ask to walk me through what happens when the user double clicks a folder. When Dolphin opens a folder, it sends a request to key IO to retrieve the list of files in that folder. KIO handles the communication with the system, whether local or remote, and returns the file data. Other applications follow similar patterns using KDE's framework for managing window and system resources. Interaction with the OS kernel. KDE does not directly interact with the kernel. Frequently, instead it relies on system libraries, blah blah blah. KDE frameworks and Qt are high-level libraries and abstract away direct interactions with the kernel. System calls, and API calls. Puts. As I can. I'm trying to think about what are the best ways to ask the questions to have a clear picture, because I think that it makes a lot more sense to clarify like the overall picture of what you are trying to investigate before going over the code, because there's so many files. So I think that the most productive way to think about it is this way of so I'm basically looking at a view inputs and outputs and then transition of states between. So the input's probably going to be double click on the folder, And in order to find that, you need to figure out the distinction between, like, what is the boundary between the codes you have there and the external environments, and then how is that going to interact with the libraries that they are using? Because then I can search for the names of the functions. But if obviously, I think I can like what I'm debating now is like different ways to prompt ChatGPT, because I do think that I can extract a lot of information about the, and I don't want to mess up the history, if that makes sense, because it does the responses based on the thread, I think, that you have open. Inputs events from devices are handled by the X11 server or Wayland, which are parts of the display. So one of the things that I want to see, that I'm trying to clarify, I tried to clarify the first time that I started studying this, is whether or not the optimizations are done by Qt or they are done by Dolphin. But from the previous responses, it looks like they are done by Dolphin, but I'm still not 100% sure. So I wanna try to think about ways to ask questions related to this as well. KDE applications send rendering commands to the X11 or Wayland system Plasma as a desktop shell. Coordinates the layouts of Windows panels, blah blah. When interacting with files, KDE uses key.io, which abstracts access to file systems and provides access to local files, remote servers, and network protocols. Interacts with the system's underlying file system driver. So in my situation there, this would be like the dir access. So dir access on Godot is the class that's gonna manage the directories. There's also file access, but the class that they use on the editor file system is the dir access. So it's kind of like you can view it as a server, I think. So it's basically gonna be, I think it's gonna be the like direct correlation there. So I'm gonna write this stuff here. Is dir access. Obviously, it's going to be different, but I think it's kind of similar. KIO communicates with the kernel's VFS virtual file system to access files and directories. For example, when Dolphin opens a folder, it requests the file listing from KIO. It translates these into system calls that the kernel handles via VFS virtual file system. And there's a lot of stuff that I want to ask. KDE and kernel. So summary. Plasma Shell manages the KDE desktop environments, handling input events. KDE applications like Dolphin are launched by Plasma and interact with the kernel via high-level libraries. KIO for file management, KT for UI rendering. Wayland is the intermediary between KDE applications and the kernel for inputs-output handling. KIO abstracts file access and manages communication with the kernel's file system layers and external network resources. This flow ensures that KDE Plasma can efficiently manage user interactions while abstracting weak direct kernel interactions. So I'm gonna ask this one first, then I'm going to ask the flow. So it looks like you're gonna have the plasma, and you're gonna have this Wayland, which are the environment around it, and then you're gonna have the key IO, which is the bridge between the environment and the code, and then you're gonna have the Qt, which is the visualization. I'm gonna refresh this just they made some change. They made some change on ChatGPT, and then ever since they made this change, the Switchify broke. I think it has obviously has something to do with the UI and the way that they are displaying the data. So it looks like the main thing is key IO that does like the optimizations, but it's saying that it does on the Dolphin level, so it might be possible to understand what's going on. And then for Qt is more about responsiveness. Tools should run time-consuming tasks in the background, like file this thing. Vaults blocking the main trans. So it's basically using trans. Oh, so I didn't know that Qt, the code is open source. I thought since you had to create an account to download or to install, it wasn't open source, but it looks like it is open source. So I'm gonna see. Obviously, it's just extra steps. Then, if it is open source, it's just extra steps. But yeah, so I'm gonna ask about the flow, I think. So now I have to. I'm gonna spend some time thinking about what is the best way to prompt this, because I have a clear picture now. So basically, you have the Plasma outside, you have the key IO, which is the bridge. Then you have the source code that I have there. It looks like key IO is another library or framework or whatever. And the Dolphin is gonna use both this key IO and Qt. Uh, yeah, I think it uses as libraries probably, but yeah, so there's probably some functions on the Dolphin that are gonna come from these libraries. So the Qt is the visualization, the Plasma is the stuff outside, and the key IO is the bridge between the two. So I wanna ask, so the core of the thing that I'm trying to ask is basically the flow. I think I'm gonna use double click because it's the most intuitive example. So like I want to ask something along the lines of after the user double clicks the folder, can you walk me through the step-by-step functions, like what's are all the functions that get executed, and which of these functions can I can I search for on the KDE Dolphin code? So basically, the idea that I have on my mind is to try to highlight the island of codes that I have there on the repository, and then search for the keywords so I can search for the files. But I'm not really sure about what is the best way to ask this. So I think I'm just gonna ask that. Like, can you walk me? So before, in the past, on other projects, I asked ChatGPT to talk about the functions, but I think sometimes it's not very good at that. I'm not 100% sure why that's the case. It might be just because on the way that it's trained or the data, it tries to avoid, or it might be something that is like done later on through reinforcement learning or something like that. Where like it avoids doing specific talking about specific things because I think that it can be it's more likely that it's gonna be wrong more often if it talks about specifics because things change all the time and the way that the LLMs trained is like static. So unless they have built-in like they have extra extensions and stuff that the LLM interacts with to update this model, but I think that's from what I remember, it didn't give me. It tried to avoid giving exact functions. So, but I want to ask this anyway, to see like what it says. Then I just ask more stuff later to clarify. So I'll be right back. Let's start this again.
The optimizations for handling large directories in KDE Dolphin are primarily done within Dolphin's code itself, but they depend on underlying libraries like KEO and Qt.
So, clicking here.
The optimizations for handling large directories in KDE Dolphin are primarily done within Dolphin's code itself. ChatGPT sure you said, if I'm studying KDE Dolphin source code. ChatGPT sure you said, if I'm studying KDE Dolphin. The flow of functions that execute after a user double-clicks a folder in KDE Dolphin, or generally in Plasma, involves a series of interactions between different layers of the system. Here's a walkthrough of the typical sequence of function calls, focusing on Dolphin's file system operations, how they are handled by the KDE libraries such as KEO and Qt, and how this interacts with the kernel. I will also point out where to look in the Dolphin source code, and which entry and exit points are important for tracing the flow. Step-by-step function flow. Double-clicking a folder. User interaction double-click, entry point. User interaction in Plasma. The process starts when the user interacts with the Plasma desktop, the graphical environment, and double-clicks on a folder. Triggers the Plasma shell's event handling mechanism, typically through Qt's event system.relevant code. In Plasma, the function that handles a double-click event in Plasma's file management system, e.g., the Dolphin window might be in the Plasma shell or Dolphin code itself. You can start by looking at Dolphin's main window class and the Qt event loop. In Dolphin's case, it is often connected to the Dolphin main window class, which processes Qt events in Dolphin source code. The function is typically connected to Qt's event handling system, like Quidget.
I'm gonna write down as a reader.
The flow of functions that execute after a user double-clicks a folder in KDE Dolphin, or generally in Plasma, involves a series of interactions between different layers of the system. Here's a walkthrough of the typical sequence of function calls, focusing on Dolphin's file system operations, how they are handled by the KDE libraries such as KEO and Qt, and how this interacts with the kernel. I will also point out where to look in the Dolphin source code, and which entry and exit points are important for tracing the flow. Step-by-step function flow. Double-clicking a folder. User interaction double-click. Entry point. User interaction in Plasma. The process starts when the user interacts with the Plasma desktop, the graphical environment, and double-clicks on a folder. Triggers the Plasma shell's event handling mechanism, typically through Qt's event system.relevant code. In Plasma, the function that handles a double-click event in Plasma's file management system, e.g., the Dolphin window, might be in the Plasma shell or Dolphin code itself. You can start by looking at Dolphin's main window class and the Qt event loop. In Dolphin's case, it is often connected to the Dolphin main window class, which processes Qt events in Dolphin source code. The function is typically connected to Qt's event handling system, like Quidget moose double-click event opening. The folder Dolphin initiates folder view. Dolphin triggers the folder view once the double-click event is received. Dolphin must decide how to open the folder. It creates or updates a view to show the directory contents. This involves calling Dolphin-specific code to either read the folder contents directly or to make a request to the file system local or remote.relevant. Function in Dolphin main window slow to open folder is a function that might be connected to opening a folder. It internally uses Dolphin's file view to load the folder Dolphin source code. Look at Dolphin main window and its member functions related to folder opening. Search for slow to open folder or folder opening triggers in the event. System.keo. Request to get directory contents KEO library. Once Dolphin decides to open the folder, it must get the folder contents. This is where KEO comes in. Dolphin will make a KEO request to fetch the directory contents. KEO handles both local and remote file systems. KEO operates asynchronously to avoid UI freezing, and Dolphin will provide a callback function when the directory is loaded. Relevant KEO. Function KEO lister is likely called from Dolphin, which requests a list of files in the directory Dolphin source code. Look for how Dolphin interacts with KEO. Search for KEO lister or KEO job calls. Are often wrapped by Dolphin's own abstractions or utility functions, handling the folder listing asynchronous callbacks Qt event loop. Since KEO functions are asynchronous, it sends an event back to the Qt event loop once the directory contents are ready. This event triggers Dolphin to update its UI, i.e. to populate the folder view with the files and directories. Relevant. Qt Dolphin code. Once the KEO job finishes, it triggers a callback such as KEO list job result to notify Dolphin, which processes the files. Dolphin's view manager like Dolphin view gets the new data and renders the folder's contents. Dolphin source code. Look for slot functions like KEO list job result in the Dolphin code. This callback will trigger the function that processes the file listing, rendering the directory contents. Qt updates the UI. Qt updates the UI. Once Dolphin receives the directory listing, it updates the file system view, e.g. showing files as icons or lists. Handles this by updating the view model connected to the file system, often through QList view or QTable view, which will render the files in the Dolphin window. Relevant. Qt function. The actual UI rendering happens through Qt's model view framework. Look for functions related to model updates and views in Dolphin, e.g. QList view set model, and similar code. Dolphin updates the UI by triggering view model changes when the KEO job finishes and provides the file list. Endpoint. User sees the folder contents. Final UI update. Once the directory contents are received and the UI is updated, the user sees the folder displayed in Dolphin. This concludes the event cycle for opening a folder. Any interaction now, like clicking on a file, will trigger a similar event-driven process. Code paths to explore in Dolphin source code. You can explore the following files and classes to understand the function flow after a user double-clicks on a folder. Dolphin main window. This class handles most of the user interactions. Look at event handlers like mouse double-click event or slot functions related to opening folders. File. src Dolphin main window.cpp folder. Opening functions. Look for functions like slow open folder and open folder that deal with opening the folder and initiating the request to load the contents. File. src Dolphin main window.cpp KEO. Integration file access. Dolphin uses KEO to request file information. Look for calls to KEO lister or KEO file request to understand how Dolphin queries directory style. src Dolphin file manager.cpp or related KEO related files. Qt event handling. Qt's event system manages user input. You can check the event loop and callbacks that trigger updates to the UI. Look for Qt event handlers in Dolphin main window and other related UI files. File. src Dolphin main window.cpp and src Dolphin view.cpp for rendering the folder contents. Entry and exit points to explore in code. Entry point. The entry point begins when the user double-clicks on the folder, which triggers Qt's event system. This leads to a function called like Dolphin main window, mouse double-click event, which eventually calls slot functions like slow to open folder exit. Point. The final exit point is when Qt finishes rendering the folder contents and the user sees the list of files. This occurs after the KEO job to fetch directory contents finishes and triggers an update in the UI. By focusing on these classes and functions, you'll be able to trace the flow from user interaction to rendering the folder contents in Dolphin.
So I'm gonna write down and then just search for. So it looks like it's on source. Write down the files and both the names of the functions. List job results. It's saying it's on source. And down here. Dolphin main window. Nice. I'm gonna close the other stuff. Actually, I'll close everything. So it's saying it's gonna be on this either mouse double click events or mouse double. Or is the same word there. So let me look for the other ones, other names. So it's probably hallucinating this stuff. Looks like it does have key IO. It doesn't have a list directory. Yeah. File request. I'm gonna look into the whole thing. If I don't find on the file, and then I'm gonna look for the all the instances. It looks like it's not using Qt Q widgets as well, which is kind of weird. I'm probably gonna spend because it's probably related to this Dolphin main window. So I assume that the event's gonna be here. So now I have to find the event that is related to double clicks, then see what is gonna happen. So like if there are functions that are not part of the source code, then I'm just gonna ask GPT or Perplexity and then try to find documentation to explain. But it looks like it doesn't have these functions on this file. The other file, only other file that he talked about is Dolphin view. It has view container. Yeah, looks like it doesn't have this Dolphin view. But it does have the mouse double click event here. So maybe it was that way before and then they changed. So now I have to see. So I think one idea would be to post these functions on ChatGPT and then ask what it thinks it is related to. Item list controller tab. I think it's more likely to be this one, the main one. But it looks like all these functions are like already related to, like they're not related to the what happens outside. So I think that's probably the mouse click, double mouse click to open the folder comes from code that is outside of this repository. And this is just tasks, so I'm just gonna remove this from here. I think that these events are already like they're events on inside of the thing. So I'm gonna look for the other. It's still kind of interesting to look into these ones because, but I think probably the open folder is gonna be better. But obviously you can have a subfolder that's gonna be very large as well. So it still could give me an idea of how it works. Hmm. This comes from Qt probably. Everything that has a Q before probably comes from the Qt library, so I can write and then. But I don't think it's gonna be very interesting. Qt type bar. So I'm gonna look for this open folder. Then I'm gonna search for key IO. Yeah, I'm thinking that these functions are gonna be that ChatGPT talked about. They're gonna be on the other repositories or like some code, external code. Because I think that the code on this repository is going to be related to what happens inside of the file explorer. Not It doesn't have events for the outside, I think. But I'm gonna spend time on the main window there first to have an idea of what it does. I assume that this is going to be just the object that is initialized there in the beginning, which is the main window on the Dolphin main window thing. Or Dolphin main window. There's a pointer to that, probably. Bookmark handler, interesting. Yeah, it is the code there. So open files, open directories. These are probably kind of open directories. And maybe it doesn't matter that much. So but I think that I should still like trying to ask more questions to figure out what is the entry points. Because I'm thinking that just by looking at this so far, it seems that the optimizations that I'm looking for is probably gonna come from somewhere else, I think. But maybe, yeah, maybe I should spend more time on this, and then like once I understand more, then I expand to the other stuff. So I'm just gonna write down the names of the functions that I think are interesting on this thing here. Actually, I'm gonna look into the key IO keywords to see on this thing here, and I already looked into the open folder. I'm gonna close the other ones. Tabs, I'm not so sure, but like, obviously it's like could be, and maybe it's this. No, actually, tabs it makes more sense to me that it should be something on the top there, but it might be this stuff here on the side. Yeah, I think it probably the tabs that he's referring to is probably this stuff on the side here. So I'm gonna ask that to. So it's probably the tabs on the top there, like these ones here. Yeah, I think that's it is probably these ones. So here it doesn't have bookmarks, or maybe it's an option inside of one of the other options. Yeah, so it's probably not very interesting to what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so let me think about this. So I'm gonna try the other one, which is a lot open folder. I think I already tried, but I'm gonna close these other ones. It's kind of hard to know if I should write this down to search as well. To search later, but I think I should just start from the main window, the function that I have there already, and then see what happens. Yeah, the open folders is probably the best because there could be a situation where you have a very large directory, so it could give me an insight of how they handle, like what exactly happens after you open a folder, how it's going to, where is it going to get the data from, and then what functions it's going to use to display the icons. I think I should start from the open directories on the main window. So I'm gonna close the other stuff and I'm gonna search for the key KIO on the Dolphin main window first. Yeah, let me close everything. So I'm just gonna see to have an idea of like what is going on. This one looks interesting, Open File Manager, window job. So I think what I should do, because yeah, since Qt and this key KIO are open source, I should just write down like I'm probably gonna do the Skyly Draw flow charts. So write down the names of the functions that are involved, and then uh, find the repositories for each one later and figure out how they work. If I can't figure out the optimizations just by looking into this, or maybe it can go. Yeah. The problem, I think, if I manage to compile, then I probably will be able to go by the definition there, but I don't think it's gonna be worth it probably because it's gonna be very annoying and it's gonna take like a lot of time to be able to compile this. So I think it's probably easier to just find the just go over these repositories. So I should find the Qt, then I create a Skyly draw or I just write down the flow of the functions and then I go over each one and then for each one I try to clarify the optimizations. While trying to minimize everything that is not related to what I'm trying to figure out. And obviously, as I go over this, I'm going to ask ChatGPT a lot for each function. See if I can. It probably comes from Qt. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. Yeah, it comes from Qt. So it probably is probably very similar to Godot, where it connects a signal. Yeah, this is for signals. It's basically subscribing to an event, and then it's using this as a like what is gonna happen when the event happens. Then it passes a lambda, which is probably a callback of what is gonna happen after the event, maybe. It's actually not that hard to understand. Actually, studying Haskell made it a lot easier. Like it's a lot more. I'm not really sure if it's because it's building up from the stuff that I learned before, but I think like Haskell made it very clear to me the the difference between functional programming and object oriented and like what is usually happening on C++ code. Like because they're usually the part that is the most annoying or the hardest to figure out are the side effects and the mutation of data. And by learning Haskell, like the learning a programming language that forces you to not have side effects and to think about it just in this sense of the like you have inputs and outputs and then you transform the data. It makes it a lot more clear when I'm reading the functions to like think about what is going on. So I don't know that I have to study this connect later. I'm gonna write down. It's kind of lagging because of because of the downloads on Qt, I think. Just, so let me continue this. Probably this Spartans. Compare files. Interesting. I assume URL is like the navigation paths on the tree. Because obviously the folders are gonna be trees, so. These actions is also like another pattern that happens all the time, but it's kind of confusing to me. I always thought, like, since the first time that I seen this, I always thought that, like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. It felt overly complicated, but, like, since it is a fundamental pattern, so I think it's obviously, like, useful, but it does feel overly complicated, and it's not very clear on my mind how exactly it works, but I think it's related to the events, so. Like, a lot of the times on these frameworks, what happens is that after you have the events, you're gonna have these classes that are Actually, on Godot, there is the same thing as well. They also use actions, but in a different way, but it's basically the same pattern. So you create a data structure or a class or something that is going to encapsulate the states of the behavior that is gonna happen after the event is triggered. But yeah, I think it kind of makes sense actually, because like you, it's as if you're using the state of the class to be able to create control flow that's gonna determine the different pathways of what is gonna happen. But I'm not 100% sure when this makes sense to implement. I think that it makes sense to implement on situations where you're gonna have cache. So I think probably the actions is directly correlated with caching because you want to preserve like whenever you need to preserve the state to determine the behavior that happens as a consequence of interactions. So I think that's probably it makes sense to. It does feel kind of overly complicated though, but maybe it does make sense. I'm gonna go back to this because of the. I tried to save to change the format because I hate this. I don't understand why people use this format a lot on C and C++. Because to me it seems kind of weird because you waste two different lines. You waste actually one line just for the thing here, which makes the thing like longer, the file longer. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me this style. Makes a lot more sense to put the curly brackets at the end of the thing, which just saves one line. I think it's kind of weird the actions thing. It might be weird in some situations because if you think about it, like the behavior is usually connected to different parts of the system. It's like the objects that are part of the scene. So if you want to cache so I think there's two options. If you want to change what's going to happen based on the interaction of the events, based on previous interactions, you can either change the actual objects on the scene and then like make them have the past, or you can create this like external thing which is just actions, and then based on that you're gonna change what happens. So like it is a more composition approach to use actions, I think. It might be because of that people use it because it makes it less attached to the specific thing that is connected to the event. So I'm just gonna focus on the open directories. It seems to be the main one that I'm interested on. So it would be nice to be able to see like the function outside of this code that triggers everything. And obviously I can go over the main. Maybe I will still go over the main. So it's gonna use this Qt stuff probably on Dolphin tab widgets. And there's two different functions, but this one opens that one. I'm gonna search for everything that has open as a keyword. Because since it has tabs there, I'm not really sure if this is the one. Opens each directory in theirs in a separate tab. A separate tab. A split view is set, should I circle within one tab. I could go from the main as well. Should see, but I think that's probably gonna be not very good. There's a lot of stuff here. In order to understand from the main, I think that I'm gonna have to parse through a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter to me. But I'm just gonna give a superficial view here, just see if I can find anything that like sets up the initial thing. It's probably gonna be on the window though, because the main is gonna initialize the window. Maybe this application data. This is about data, so it's probably not. Because I want to understand both situations when when you open a subdirectory or a directory after the thing is open, and the other one is what happens when you open the Explorer from outside. Yeah, initialize the main window here. Open files and directories. So I guess it just like maybe that's what. Yeah, but it wouldn't make sense. It's because it's the whole thing that I'm not really sure. Like, this is one of the things that I was thinking about before. Is that like if someone was able to simplify the build system, which I think is a very difficult problem, and that's the reason why it is the way that it is today. Because it's like a coordination problem. But if someone could simplify how easy it is to build things and to visualize how things are connected, you would make it you would make a lot more people work on a lot more stuff and contribute, because a lot of the times what stops people from like studying this stuff and to build is because you have a massive amount of energy in the beginning. And obviously if you're determined enough and is important enough to you, you're going to spend the time to solve, but like a lot of the times there's projects that you don't really care about it in the beginning, and then after you build and start playing around, then you become more invested. So I think it is a very, the reason why I'm talking about this now is because I think like what makes it hard to understand the entry points or the connection between this and the other code, the Plasma code that ChatGPT talks about, that Wayland server, is that I'm not really sure what is gonna what is gonna be happen on the what is gonna be happening on the operational system level to connect the two different codes. So like at which moment is the main process, which I assume that the main process is gonna be the Plasma shell or the Wayland server, and that process is going to initialize this one. So how does it work under the hood when the other process initializes this one? Because it seems that here, as is initializing this, is going to already open the state. So the question that I have is whether or not this main function here, is the one that is going to run when you open a file, for example. It might be actually. I think that it probably makes sense. So like every time that you open the File Explorer, because after you close, it's just gonna close the process, which means it's not gonna. So I think probably the main is the endpoints. So I think every time that you open the File Explorer and you're using the Dolphin thing, it's gonna run this main function in the beginning. Yeah, so I think that actually the way that you attach doesn't matter. Because obviously, I'm not really sure if there is an equivalent on Linux. Well, obviously on Windows you're gonna have dynamic linking libraries and you're gonna have static linking libraries. And I think that it does change in some situations, but even on the situations I'm not really, I think it doesn't matter that much because it's always gonna run the main function as the entry point. So it does change on the like parent process, but I think it doesn't change that much on the child. It's more about the organization of memory of the whole thing on the hardware done through the operational system. Because I think that the main benefit of using dynamic linking libraries is that you can share the same space, you can share the same memory on the hardware, because you can just use the one library, one instance of the library, and then you can have different processes using the same code. They just use the same memory. So I think that these URLs here are gonna be like the initial files or initial folders that it displays there. It's very likely that this function here, the open directory, is gonna be the one that opens the folders inside the file explorer. Yeah, this is interesting as well. So it's doing a check here because apparently you can use this with the different platforms. And so far, it's actually not that hard to understand how it works. I think this is the reason why it's probably a lot better to, like in the beginning, like if I could go back and learn everything again. But obviously, this is the thing that's it makes it hard that you don't know in the beginning because you don't know what you don't know. But I think that's like the most important thing to learn is the fundamental principles. Because once you understand fundamental principles, it's always going to be the same, and then you're going to have variance on the way that the fundamental principles are expressed, but they're always the same. So like the way that I imagine is like, for example, something like the pre-code camp, which is the stuff that I did in the beginning. Like instead of people teaching syntax, they should, but obviously this is the part that is very hard to do. Like there was a way to show the skeleton of the thing. Like the skeleton is basically the fundamental principles. Then from the skeleton you build the nuance, which is basically the syntax and stuff like that. It makes a lot more sense than. But usually the way that is done, and this is the problem, but it is understandable because it's hard. Like on documentations and everything like that, like usually people are going to describe, it is the same problem that I talked about on TypeScript, that you go through the decoration. They just like put the syntax and explain what it does, but they don't talk about the fundamental principle behind it, which is the most important thing. And then the reason why it's annoying because then what happens is that it makes sense because like maybe it's not the time and the place, like for our documentation, for example, to talk about this stuff because like they might be assuming that you already know from like somewhere else. So like on the documentation, they're just talking about the specifics of that implementation. But I think like things like freecont camp and these kinds of things, they should try to like instead of teaching a bunch of different frameworks, you teach just the core very well. That would be far more effective. And there's also not a lot of stuff here, a lot of codes. It's kind of easier to understand. So what is the connection between the application and the window? S- And this, I think that like this is the exact same problem with lead code and stuff like that. Is that it doesn't make sense because like you spend a bunch of time studying stuff that doesn't matter instead of studying the fundamental principles. Like even if you have like data structures and like algorithms and you have the categories, like it's not that it's bad, it's just like a supplement. But I do think that it's also a search problem, I think. It's like how do people that are beginning get exposed to this stuff? Like this stuff that actually matters more in the beginning. Yeah, because like if you're doing a lead code problem and you don't understand why you need to use those things, like you're not gonna care about it. That's the thing. So it's kind of backwards the way like the beginner information a lot of the times would be a lot more beneficial for someone that already understands the fundamental principles, not the way other way around. It doesn't seem that connects this to the window. Search for this. What's this split view? There's probably some setting that determines the layout of the visualization. So show it's gonna start the thing. Look for it later. It doesn't have anything. So it's not very clear to me how it's gonna connect the window. So I assume that it is like either doesn't matter or it connects inside of one of the classes. Obviously, that's like the only options that make sense. Mm. Check. Yeah, that's kind of so it has to come from this. Yeah, which is probably from Qt. So the show function probably comes from this Qt class. which probably I can see through here. But imagine that it's similar to Godot. So in Godot they have I think that the function is called show and it's from the canvas item class, which just makes the element visible on the screen. So I assume that is basically the same thing that the show there is doing. I'm gonna look for the open folders. Open the sure the everything that is related to open. Open directories. Actually, this is the one that I wrote. So they're both open directories. Is there a difference between them? So the main difference is the arguments. It's probably the same, just using the M tab widgets to open. So I assume that the optimizations are probably going to be on Qt and this KIO because it doesn't look like that has anything there. So yeah, it's gonna be on this Qt on the KIO, the optimizations I think. Think probably KIO either communicates with the Plasma shell or the Plasma shell is probably the kernel in this situation. So I think that's it probably communicates with the kernel. It's using an iterator, then looping. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to explain the function. Explain the following function and also whether or not it's possible to understand that different. This is show optimize loading large directories very fast. So I need to study this thing here. Because the thing I don't understand is like if you have a massive directory, then how are they going to make sure that the loop is very fast? The thing is like it should be another function though, because not what I'm. Maybe it is what I'm looking for. Like what I'm trying to understand is the moment that it loads the directories and how it's going to create the because this essentially that's what I'm trying to optimize now. Like what happens when it loads and how it determines what is going to show there in the beginning. So it's kind of weird to me because it doesn't seem that it has anything there that looks that interesting. So the only thing that would make sense is that it is like optimizations that are coming from Qt or from the it has to be Qt in this example, like on the function there. So one thing that I can do is search for the functions as well. Because obviously if it's gonna be calling this function from some context. So I need to see if I can find so here is the ones this one is the different one. It's basically the same thing. So I'm just gonna remove from this. This is related to bookmarks, so I assume that it doesn't matter to me. Well. So this one might be interesting. I'm gonna write down the name. That's not very interesting. So it looks like it's only these places. So it's in the beginning on the main application once like So probably what happens is that Plasma is going to initialize this process when you double click a folder from outside, which is, means it's gonna run this main function here in the beginning, and then it's gonna call open directories. So it should be the function that is responsible for, which comes from the other thing, that is responsible for loading the directories. So the situation that I'm thinking about is, I'm gonna, what happens when you have a million directories? Because the problem is I can't really test because I can't build the thing unless I spend, maybe I'll decide to spend more time solving all the problems with CMake, but I'm not really sure if it's a waste of time or not. It might be better to just try to. I think that the best approach is to try to figure out or clarify everything without building first, and then only uh, spend a bunch of time trying to build if it's the last, like, as the last resource if I don't understand. Because obviously it would be a lot better if I could just create an example that has like a million directory or a million subdirectories, but which is essentially what I did the last time that I streamed. And on this file explorer from Windows, it loaded and then just loaded the bar here, and it did load very fast. But in on VS Code, it didn't. VS Code just crashes when you try to open. So there is some optimizations, but obviously on the Windows, because the Windows code is not open source, so can see. So it would be better if I could build. It would be easier because then I can just create a folder with a million subfolders, and then I can just step into the code to see what is the data, what happens to the data, and like what exactly is happening when you load. As here it looks like it's mainly gonna come from from this queue list. I want to ask about this tab page again to understand what is this exactly. It's from according to GPT, I think it's said that it is the stuff on the top that shows there, but I'm not 100% sure. So this is probably when you have multiple, so like it is instances because it's probably when you have multiple different explorers open. It's gonna get all of them, then loop over all of them. So this one would be one interface, and then it's gonna call open directory. Then it's probably gonna open another window. I have to study this stuff. It's probably related as well. I'll be right back. Nice. Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking that this stamp page is the like what shows there. So one thing that I'm thinking about now is the URLs here because obviously, like if this contains all the URLs, then it's probably the thing that's optimized as well. It might be something from Qt actually. Or maybe it's comes from here. Hmm. Yeah, so it is an optimization from Qt, 100%. Whereas, so the way that I'm thinking, like the analogy on Godot would be that these URLs here are the paths that you get from the access class, and then from those paths you create the other class that is gonna have the states of what's gonna show there. And it's basically the same thing that they are doing. They get these paths here, which are gonna be this q list qurl. Then they call the other function. Then from the other function they call another qt function to create the directories. So I'm gonna see if I can find the source code for Qt, and then I'm gonna search for these classes, try to understand how they work. It is kind of weird that it doesn't have, like, I was expecting to have more stuff, like, but it might be implemented on the Qt source code. Like what I was expecting to see is stuff related to async libraries and to threads. And I'm not really sure as well. Like ChatGPT and Perplexity talked about the virtualization thing a lot. And I'm not really sure because I couldn't find a lot of videos that talk about this as well. But I imagine this like similar to, obviously it's going to be different, but kind of similar to the way that React DOM works, where you have like a virtual version, which is not what updates, is like you have a real version, which is, you have two versions. One is the one that you're displaying, and the other one you use to update the state. And then once the other one is ready, you swap them. So imagine there is something like this. But from what I'm seeing now, it doesn't seem that it has anything like related to this. So I'm not really sure. So assume what this does here, it goes to the end of the list, the last element. So this is looping until the last element. So this one is going to be the first one. And then this increments it references the current value. So it gets the current value on this one, and then it moves the pointer to the next one. That's basically what it's doing. If I remember correctly, I think both the star operator and the true plus are right associative. So the order of importance is going to be from right to left. So that's why I think they, but I'm not really sure if it's necessary. It might be just to make it easier to understand. But this one, it increments after the operation. So it increments the thing and then returns the previous one. So this one will be each URL. So it's like each path for the folders. Yeah, so this activate view container should be, so the way that I'm thinking is that this is gonna have the state or the information for the URL. So if this is the situation where it's already open, so it's gonna get the value. This is probably the string or the C string that contains the path to the folder, I think, and the interesting. So here it has stuff related to cache. So this is one of the places where there is optimizations. So I'm gonna spend some time studying this. I'll be right back. They also use ref counts. So obviously, I think ref counts used a lot for garbage collection. So if I don't remember the details very well, but I do think I, I do know that there are two main ways to implement garbage collection. One is mark and sweep, and the other one is I forgot the exact name of the thing, but I don't remember the differences very well. I know that's like one of them. I think it's the second one. You keep a reference to all the objects, and then once there are no references, you delete. And the other one, you just mark them, and then later on you go over and you search for them, and then delete after. I do remember reading a paper where the guy makes a analogy to dark matter and matter, but I don't remember which one is which. I think probably Mark and Sweep is focusing like on the antimatter way. Yeah, so Mark Sweep you look for stuff that doesn't exist anymore. I'm not really sure, so I have to go back to. The thing is, I don't remember what was the paper, but I think this one is the second approach where you keep a reference because it has ref counts there, and Godot's works in the same way. So it's very simple. It's using again this from Qt or Qt, however you say this. So it's just a map between the string is probably the path, and this is probably the state of the thing. So it's gonna get from the cache. The key is the path. But it's kind of weird because it doesn't. It's not. Or maybe it's going to the wrong place actually. Yeah, I think it's going to the wrong place there. But it's still I'm gonna search for this to see where it's used. It's probably used later or in different parts. 'Cause I think here is going to the a different place because here is going to be the value of the this optional, which I think it just gets the actual object there. Because like I don't know the specifics or the nuances of optional, but I think you use when you want to have the like the name says the option to return different values. So this is for a type thing. I do remember that there's some stuff on Haskell that is similar to this concept of optional on C++. So this function probably just sees just checks to see whether or not the directory is already open. Yeah, so it's checking the URL, so the URL is probably the path that shows here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's how it works. And the tab page is the class that has the states of whatever is showing currently. So the tab page primary view container is going to be whatever is here, and the URL is going to be the path here. So if they're equal, it means that it was open. And then it's just going to return this optional with the index. So it's storing everything on this tab page based on the index. This just sounds the current. Yo, thanks for the follow. Just so you know, I'm not reading chats. So, and I haven't been reading chats for a long time. And it's because usually, like from my experience so far, is not. I think like it's different for different people because I think for the most for most people, the reason why they stream is different. So like I'm not really streaming for. It is kind of like entertainment, but the main reason is to optimize my time. So I'm much more focused on actually doing stuff. So like it's just based on probability, most of the time it's gonna be a lose-lose situation to interact with the chats. So that's why I decided to not do it. But maybe at some point, I think like on some situations, I'm probably gonna go back to reading chats. But I just feel like it's not very good most of the times. Yeah, so this is the interesting class, I think. So this one is the one that is gonna have the optimizations and it has the model thing here that ChatGPT was talking about. So this class, obviously, as the name says, I think is gonna be the class that is gonna manage the state for what actually shows up there. So the way that it works is basically it's not it's actually so far I liked it. I like the code because it's simple. It's very easy to understand. So it makes me think that's probably like they spend a lot of time doing this because it seems very good. So the way that it's gonna work is that you're gonna have the paths here. Then it's gonna loop over the paths and it's gonna check to see if there was a path open on the current. So like the tab is the thing that controls the states of the overall thing. I'm still not 100% sure whether or not is like referring to this stuff here, but I think it's more likely that is referring to the selection here. That would make more sense to me. Then the URL is gonna be whatever shows up here, and the view container is gonna be the state of the actual thing here. So it's the class that manages whatever shows inside of the thing. So on this one, I think what it's doing is just if there is one open, it means already that it already created a class. And then so like this display tab widget is gonna have a member variable, which is gonna be the one that is like this container here. So if it's already open, so assume on the other function is gonna create this member variable of this class, which is gonna be of this tab page here. So it gets the tab page based on the index and on this function. So this tab widget has the tab page index, and it casts through a Dolphin tab page. So I have to clarify what this is. already wrote down. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT again. But this one, I think it is, yeah, this is the class that comes from Qt, so it's gonna be a Qt widget. And then based on the index, it gets this widget. So this has to come from actually from Qt. So the tab page comes from tab widgets. The other one comes from Qt. So I assume that this other one is gonna be situation where I have a split view probably. And okay, so on the class it has the, so this is gonna have a pointer to the primary and secondary probably. So this tab page is probably the thing that, because the overall class that has the states of the whole thing. So the whole visualization of the GUI of the File Explorer, and the other class, which is the container, is going to be the class that manages the state of the actual files and folders. So I think that the optimizations are that I'm interested on are gonna be on the other class. So I'm gonna look into the other function as well, the one that executes after, or executes if you don't have the thing open. So I think it's gonna be this one probably. Primary URL is gonna be obviously the URL of the folder, I think. Oh, so this is the connection between the window and the application. So it's very similar to Godot as well. Like it's using, I think like whenever you use a class, you call a function from a class like this, is very likely that, I think it's probably always the case that the class is going to be a singleton. Singleton means you only have one instance of the class, so one object of the class on the entire thing. So initialize outside, and then it calls the functions from the other ones on the window, and that's what creates the bridge between the application class and the main window class. And then it's going to initialize the page here, set as active, connect some signals. So these functions are probably the ones that are going to trigger when you change the stuff. Wait view container. Yeah, so it's going to initialize the other one from here. This is probably what happens when you change the path by writing stuff here, I think. So like the events, this function is gonna run probably, or this one. So I think that this is the main class. It opens with the URL. I'm gonna write down stuff. So the equivalent there on Godot would be the I forgot exactly the I think it's just editor file system directory. Yeah, it's editor file system directory. So I think that's the like one show one mapping. So actually this is different, so it's not the dir access. So this is gonna be Q URL. But it's not really Q. Maybe it is actually. So like it is a function of the dir access that gets the paths. So I think it's get directory or something. I'm gonna open to remember what it is. And then the view container that I have there is gonna be the equivalent of editor file system directory. So like it would be like creating a class. But the thing that I'm thinking that is kind of weird. Like this is the thing that is annoying that I don't have the build because I'm just assuming that it's going to load fast, but I'm not really sure. Like I would only be able to know for sure if I run. So like the reason why it's weird to me is that it doesn't seem like unless there is some optimization on the Qt classes, which is possible. Like how is it making fast? Like the explanation it could be that the part that is slow is not the like looping over the strings to find the current directory open. The what makes it slow is the creation of the classes. But in my mind, there should be an optimization. But I guess even if there is an optimization, actually, it's not the equivalent. I'm confusing because the view container is the thing that creates the whole thing. Yeah, so it's a different thing. Yeah. So the tab page would be the tab page is the state of the whole window that shows up, I think, or most of the window. And the view container would be the class, like it would be the file system doc, I think. So yeah, I think it's the file system doc. So inside of the file system doc, inside of the view container, there should be in the constructor, based on the way that is working there, in the constructor there should be functions. Yeah, so I have to see how does the view container loads the thing. That's what I need to. Yeah, so it's different because on the on Godot's code, the code I think the separation is different. So on Godot's code, it's gonna loop over the directories on the editor file system, and then it's gonna send that to the file system doc. But on this code, it seems that it is looping over the strings first, then sending the strings to the. It doesn't loop over the strings from another class. So it is kind of similar, but it's just a different separation. So you would be just this function here, I think. It's the collection of this. Yeah, so it is kind of similar because the dir access is gonna be because it does kind of work like a list, so it would be like the queue list, the dir access, even though it has more functionality. And then yeah, the difference is that this I think is a string, it's a Godot string. Yeah, it is so when you get next is a Godot string, and then on Qt uses the Q URL. So actually I'm confusing because it's probably different. The URL is like the main, like it's the path of the main thing. But for the folders, I'm not 100% sure if it is a string or like how do they do it. So I have to look into this. to see how do they create. So it's probably another class on inside of this one because obviously when I saw that there's search here, so it's probably search is probably equivalent to this stuff here. It might be this thing here. So the container seems to be like a bigger. So it might be this class here. I'm gonna write down the relationship between them. So I need to understand how do they create the relationship between folders and subfolders, and what algorithms that they use to like open and close folders. Yeah, so they are using a model view controller pattern. So obviously, like the name says, here is going to be the controller, and the other class is like this class is the view, which is probably the main thing that creates the files and folders. It's actually not that difficult to understand. And this is the model. And it's gonna be difficult to figure out how to. Cause like so far, I still haven't seen anything that stands out as some optimization or something like that. So just gonna get an idea first of this before I go to the other classes. I think I'm gonna ask ChatGPT as well. So I'm probably gonna use Scaly Draw later. So once I clarify, I should probably draw the main relationships on Scaly Draw and then try to. I think the main thing that I have to clarify is what exactly are the classes that create the folders and files, each folder and file, and then how does the algorithm works to connect to create this structure, because obviously I assume that like it has to be a tree. So either it's gonna be on one of the constructors of these classes, or it's gonna be like this classes instead of this one, or it's gonna be a function from this class that is going to probably be, it has to be either recursive or it has to implement probably you're gonna use a list to do the breadth first search. So I assume that either one of those things have to find that function. and there is gonna be obviously a relationship between the different folders and files of each level. So I think I have to clarify that. And then these functions, I assume that they have to be related to the optimization of what's gonna show on the thing, because obviously like that's gonna determine the range you would like go for each level. Like, so that's the relationship that I have to clarify now. Obviously, so I think that the view is probably gonna be the class that creates the thing, but it might be the model as well. That should be like, obviously they're gonna be connected, so they're all involved. But I'm looking based on the names of the functions that are connecting to the signals. And the controller is obviously gonna be the thing that has the logic to determine the relationship between the files and folders. So I think that like the model, it should be like kind of like a database. So maybe the model is the thing that is the most important for the. The analogy would be obviously that the model is like the editor file system on Godot, and the view is the file system doc. So I'm gonna write this down. Actually, editor file system because it's more like the backend. I should probably put the other way around. Maybe a client server. So I'm gonna explore in the order here, I think. The controller. So the controller doesn't have an equivalent on Godot, which makes me think that what like obviously. So I'm gonna have to. I have to think about what is the best strategy to. I think like the first thing, the first phase would be like I have to spend more time clarifying the connection of everything, then create a flowchart on ScalarDraw. Then once I have a very good idea, I think the main priority should be to look for where the optimizations are at, and then see what kinds of things are related to the optimizations. They're like directly connected, so that way you can create a hierarchy of importance. The main thing that I'm trying to implement is the optimizations. Then I should think about like other stuff that might be useful as well to try to implement. So like first clarify a lot how like the overall picture and how the optimizations are implemented. Then once I figure out like from and I have to I think I'm gonna spend a lot more time to try to clarify like from first principles because essentially that's what I have to do. Like I have to extract the first principles from the Qt library and from this code here to understand why the optimizations work. Then once I extract the first principles and I have a good idea of how everything is connected, then I can think about how to implement that on the how to incorporate on the code that I have there. So I should probably do another like on the side. Another, but I'm not really sure if it's necessary to do the flowcharts for Godot because I already have a good idea on my mind on how it works. But it might be good because then I can like put them side by side and compare. And this is also a big difference is that on the Explorer you can change the way you view the files and folders. So you can viewing icons and not adjusting things. Yeah, so I'm gonna look into the model first. This is another difference is that like at least from what it seems right now is like this class here, which is initializing the other ones, it connects the two different classes, and on Godot don't have that. Like they are like the model is it would be like the model is like a member of the view, so the model would be initialized on the view on Godot, and you don't have a class that connects them both. And I think it might make more sense actually the way that they did it. Like at least it's easier to think about, is more cleaner. Like not sure if more cleaner is the way to put it. Because like one of the things that is very confusing on Godot is because like you're using threads. They're using a thread to go over the directory and create the classes that are going to be responsible for showing or for having the states of the subdirectories. And the confusing part is that there's a bunch of if else conditions and like they are connected on the with the process of the class, the notification process function, which runs every frame. And it works kind of like a semaphore in the way that they did it there. That's like based on the flag variables, like in order to prevent the thread from being called multiple times for the same function, they put this flag variables as like fences, which makes it very confusing to understand what is going on. And I think that this might be because like it might be a byproduct of the way that they did it because of the separation of the classes, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter that much. But it might be the case that like if I create another class and then instead of initializing the editor file system inside of the file system doc, you create another class and then you initialize both on that class. It makes it a lot easier to manage because like it's easier to think about the relationship between them. So this class would be like in this case they also have this controller class here, but this would be like this would have functions that work like as a bridge between what you see on the front end and what's happening on the back end to generate the data. I think that makes it easier to think about. So I think that the difference would be probably that like what would initialize the thread would be the parent class instead of the server. Or actually, it could be the server still, but what would manage the control flow would be the parent class. So like it would simplify, it would make it easier to understand the control flow. But I'm not 100% sure if it is necessary. But like intuitively, it just makes more sense to me. Like it makes it a lot easier to think about, I think. But I have to spend more time thinking about this because it might be, maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it also has to do with the like because on Godot you have the main function is the notification function that each class has that is going to determine the behavior of the class hierarchy of each node on the cycle. And then that function runs it has a switch statement that determines for different parts of the cycle whether or not you want to do something. So I think because of that and that function, it also like it might be more help like it might be better to create this other class and then put the two other classes as members of the main this like which would be basically the way that they are doing here. So let me think about this. Maybe the reason why they did this is because like it's kind of different. Because on this one, but like you could do it in the same way actually. Because like here you have a main URL and then you have the paths of the folders and files for the current one. And you can also have multiple different windows, I think. So that's probably the reason why they did it. But I think that I the stuff that I want to do is probably closer to this as well. Yeah, I think that it might simplify the life cycle, like I said. So like I think the question would be like if you put the functionality on the notification of the class that would connect both of them, the front end and the back end, whether or not it would make it easier to, because then you can just pass all the like kind of confusing parts to the parent class, and then like just leave only the functionality related to actually creating stuff. So like the other classes, I would remove this stuff from the notification process, for example, and I would put only on the parent class. So like the event cycle of the state, it would be determined by the main, the parent one, and the other two classes would only be responsible for like they would only implement functionality as a consequence of the main one. So the main one determines like it synchronizes both. And then you would do that through signals, which is one of the annoying things that I was thinking about there, I think. Yeah, because yeah, but maybe not actually. Because the way that it works now, like it sends emits the signal directly to the front end. Yeah, but if you're gonna implement cache, hmm. I'm gonna ask this to GPT see what it thinks as well. I think I'm gonna stop streaming now. So I'm not really tired, but wanna go eat. Um, I think I'm gonna stop streaming now, and I'm going to think about this off stream. So obviously, I still haven't find like this stuff that is supposed to optimize things. So it might be this class here. It might come from the KDE thing, yeah. So it comes from an external library. I'm gonna stop here, and then I'm gonna do the beginning of the control flow in ScalarDraw. So just translate this stuff to ScalarDraw. And like I wanna spend more time thinking about this, just see whether or not it's worth it to try to change and implement in this way, because I'm not 100% sure. Like I kind of intuitively think that's like the problem is on Godot is that the control flow is kind of annoying to think about because of the thread. But I'm not 100% sure if creating another class and then putting the other two, if it's gonna allow me to make it cleaner. So it would it would solve the control flow problem, that it makes the thing confusing as a byproduct, or not. And because I think I'm probably gonna have to implement a cache and these optimizations. So I think that it might help to, because then I would put more stuff on the class that connects both the. So I'm thinking about creating a class that would connect the file system doc, which is the class that has the front end of what shows on the thing, like it has the logic to create the front end, and the editor file system, which is the class that has the logic to create the state of the information that is going to be used by the front end to show. So it would be like a model view controller pattern. So like the new class would act as a controller, even though in their situation is different because they also have the controller class. But I can start off the middle class as the controller. But I still think I would put the cache on the editor file system because it makes more sense. So the question would be like, what exactly would be the purpose of the new class, and whether or not would this make it? Because I think the main thing is the notification function. So whether or not we would change the notification function. That's what I have to think about. So here you have this function, and this function runs every cycle, and the argument that is passed depends on what part of the cycle it is. So the stuff that I'm talking about is like this, like all these uh, variables here, and they're also on the other functions. But I still think that I would have to put a thread, like the thread would still be on this, but maybe I could use more threads and then initialize them on the other class. Yeah, I think that actually, so I like trying to, because a lot of the times I work like this, like sometimes like I have like I can't really put into words. It's like the subconscious mind kind of captures something, but I can't put it on conscious. So I think that is becoming more clear. The reason why I think that it might be a good idea to do this is because the way that I was thinking about doing before is like after you reach a certain amount of time. So I know based on like I did the experience manually to see how long it's gonna take to how long it usually takes to go through each file on average, like the whole cycle, to display the actual from the beginning of loading the folder to displaying the file on the thing, how much time you would take on average based on the amounts of files and folders that a directory has. And the average is like around 10 to 9 milliseconds per file or folder. Per file, per thing you're gonna show. So the way that I was thinking about it is like creating something that creates a range. So let's say the limit is like 5 seconds or like 2 seconds or something like that. Then once it hits that threshold, you would send the signal, emit the signal to display this stuff already. So this file, this thing here on the function that's just this function here, the function that traverses the directory and creates the subdirectory and like creates the state. You would put the condition here to emit the signal if the time is passed, probably in the beginning of the, probably on multiple different parts here. And then I would emit the signal right away. And then after emitting the signal, I would continue to run this one to load the rest of the directory. But the problem with this is that like it's an issue with synchronizing and maintaining a cache. Because obviously like as once you send something to the front and the user starts interacting, like you need a way to keep track of what's happening on the overall thing. But I'm still not 100% sure if it is a good idea to like put this logic and this functionality on the like middle class, let's say, because it might be just good enough, or it might be just better as well to implement this on this class as well. So like the question would be, what is the best way to keep track of the? You would obviously be a cache, and then like every time that you create or that you update the state, you set a flag on the cache that indicates that the file is already loaded. And then you put a check on the front end to see if it was loaded or not. If it wasn't, you send a signal. So I guess the question would be like when you send the signal, yeah, but it might be possible to create another function and then you just use another thread instead of creating the other class. So I'm gonna ask this stuff to GPT. I'm gonna try to clarify like what is the purpose of the controller on the motherboard controller usually. Then I'm gonna think about whether or not I'm gonna ask questions to GPT to and probably watch videos to try to clarify whether or not it's necessary or like it's a good idea to create another class and then put the other two. And then I'm gonna do the schedule stuff on this one and yeah, we're gonna obviously next time that I stream, I'm probably going to go deeper into this class and probably on the other repository. So I'm still gonna have to spend time to clarify exactly where do I think the points of optimization, like where the optimizations are happening. Then once I figure that out, I'm probably gonna go over the other, both on Qt on this KAIO to see how do they like what are they doing to make it faster to load the directory. And if I can't find here, like if I look into all these functions and I don't see anything that's like seems interesting, I think I'm not gonna spend the time to try to build because it's just gonna be too annoying. I think it makes more sense to like, after that part, I just start trying to implement stuff on Godot to see what happens, and then just go over trial and error. That's probably gonna be a better idea. Then in case I even if I spend a bunch of time trying to implement a bunch of stuff and I can't figure out, then I might go back to this and try to build just to see. So I can go back and forth until I find something that works. That's probably what I'm gonna do. So next time I'm just gonna go deeper into this thing here. I'm just continue to study this source code, and then I'm probably gonna study the source code of Qt and this KIO if I can find. So yeah, so see you next time.